Do you know the rules for passing by a graveyard? The real rules? Not the ones you read in tourist guides, but the life and death rules. You don't? Then you're lucky so far. But once you hear this story, you'll know the rules. And once you know them, you can never unlearn them. My name is Michael Davis. 3 months ago, I broke a rule my mother taught me. I did it to save my best friend. This is the result. Every night at 3 a.m., something stares up at me from beneath my apartment window. An ancient grave digger with black voids where his eyes should be. It all started with my mom's superstitions. My mother was a superstitious woman. She believed in and practiced all sorts of nonsensical rules. Don't step on sidewalk cracks. Throw salt over your shoulder if you spill it. These were the kinds of things that everyone blindly followed, even though their origins and reasons were vague, and you knew breaking them wouldn't have any real consequences. One of my earliest memories is the night my mother nervously ordered me to hold my breath. It was late at night, and I don't remember where we were coming from, but my dad and mom were in the front seat, and I was half asleep in my car seat in the back. That's when Mom said, in an urgent voice,
Michael, hold your breath.
she slapped my dad's arm.
You too, please. Just do it.
Then she took a deep breath and held it for the duration of our drive through the foggy night. When she finally exhaled and said,
Okay.
my dad laughed. He was used to her superstitions and usually played along to humor her.
Why did we have to hold our breath, Mom?
I asked. She looked back at me.
Because we were passing a graveyard. Didn't you see it?
I hadn't. And I was glad I hadn't, because it probably would have scared me. I shook my head.
When you pass a graveyard at night, you always have to hold your breath and keep holding it until you've safely passed it by.
I frowned, wrinkling my nose.
Oh yeah? Why?
Mom looked at me with a serious face.
Michael, you just do it. For safety. That's why it's so important to always be aware of your surroundings.
Thinking back on it now, it makes me chuckle a bit. It's funny that it's important to be aware of your surroundings just to know when to hold your breath while passing a graveyard. What does it take to get hired at a graveyard? Actually, in my case, it took no effort at all. My dad, who was having coffee with some city workers at the local diner one Sunday morning, simply volunteered me when they mentioned needing a part-time cemetery groundskeeper. I didn't particularly like the job, but I did like money. And spring was here, and the weather was quite nice. So, I started working at the small-town cemetery after school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and on Saturday mornings. I pruned bushes, cleared fallen tree branches, mowed the grass, and carefully weed-whacked around headstones. I was a teenager, but a pretty good one. I was respectful of the residents of the place and treated the cemetery with proper reverence. I even grew to enjoy the work. Sometimes, I'd come in after a funeral earlier in the day. Coffins would be lowered into the ground, and the mourners would be gone by the time I arrived. But the graves would be left open, a mound of dirt next to the gaping fissure in the earth, waiting to be filled. Other times, I'd arrive on a Saturday to find one or two graves dug, deep, perfect rectangles waiting for the funerals that would take place later that day, before the coffins were even lowered. I hated to admit it, but I always liked the smell of newly dug graves. They emitted a natural, earthy scent. Sometimes, the cemetery felt and smelled ancient, a little like an old woman. That was due to the mixture of growing floral arrangements and decaying, rotting ones. Maybe it was all in my head. Cemeteries are strange places, so I figured it was normal to think a cemetery smelled strange. Still, I preferred the eternal smell of freshly turned earth. I never saw the people who dug the graves. Months went by, and I never even caught a glimpse of them doing it. I also wondered why graves were left open after a funeral. Why didn't the grave diggers just come right away and fill them? It seemed a little creepy, and maybe a signal from my survival instincts. Usually, I was alone in the graveyard during my short shifts, but sometimes I'd cross paths with other city workers who were there for some errand or task. The man who ran the graveyard, if there was such a thing, was a grumpy old man who didn't say much. One Saturday morning, I asked him about the grave diggers. "Mr. George," I asked, "how come I never see the people who dig the graves here?" They were in the small office next to the mausoleum, and George's eyes shot up from the pile of papers he was flipping through.
What kind of question is that?
He grumbled. I shrugged. I don't know. Just curious, I guess. George looked at me sharply, staring for a moment.
They work at night.
He finally answered curtly. Oh, always? They don't ever need a night off and work during the day instead? By then, he was glaring at me.
Boy, it's a night job. Now, if you ain't got nothing to do, get out of here.
From then on, I was obsessed with the grave digger. Thinking of it as a job that could only be done strictly at night made it even weirder and more fascinating. Who was this person? What drew them to this kind of work? What kind of person spends so much time at night, alone, digging graves? What did they look like? Why? Why on earth did they do this? I told my friend Daniel about it. One day, I told him about all the open graves that would appear in the morning, about what the grumpy old George had told me about the night grave digger, and about my imagined fascination with this person. Daniel stared at me disinterestedly.
Dude, you're crazy.
I chuckled.
No, seriously. I think working at the graveyard has gotten to you. I'm going to have to tell your parents to make you quit that job.
I snickered again. Nah, this is surprisingly chill work. Nothing scary or crazy has ever happened. I opened my eyes wide and playfully lunged at him. He dodged out of my way. But seriously, I continued, haven't you ever thought about what certain jobs are like? Like being a garbage truck driver or an NFL football player.
Those are really random choices, but yeah, I guess. I think about law enforcement a lot. I might want to go that route when I get older.
See, that's what I'm talking about. You think about jobs and wonder what that job is like, and maybe what kind of person does a particular job? Daniel shrugged.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes sense.
Right. So you get what I'm saying. You're already thinking about a career in law enforcement. What I want to know is, who wakes up one day and says, I feel really passionate about pursuing a career in the field of digging graves? Daniel burst out laughing.
Okay, yeah. I think I see your point. So, the guy never shows up except at night? There's literally no way to meet him?
Probably not.
Then you'll just have to go there at night.
I frowned. It's impossible to sneak out in the middle of the night. Plus, it's illegal to be in the cemetery after dark if you don't work there.
Dude, you work there.
Daniel instructed, rolling his eyes. I mean, it wouldn't be okay to be there, because it's not my working hours. Plus, don't you think it would scare him pretty bad if someone just showed up in the middle of the night? Daniel thought about it for a minute.
Then if you really want to see this guy, your only option is to set up a camera.
What? I exclaimed.
Yeah. Like a little motion activated camera. Like a Ring doorbell. You put it somewhere nobody would notice it, and it just turns on automatically if someone moves near it.
That sounds a little stalker-ish. Daniel shrugged.
You already sound stalker-ish enough, dude.
Wouldn't that be pretty suspicious? Don't you think we'd get in trouble for this?
We?
Daniel asked, laughing.
I mean, you might get in trouble. But the trick is to put it somewhere discreet, then remove it once you're satisfied. And if someone finds it, they probably wouldn't go to the trouble of tracing whose it is. But you could always make up that you were worried about vandals and were trying to do community service.
Wow, great idea, I exclaimed. For someone who wants to be a cop, you've got a pretty criminal mind.
Huh. Well, maybe that'll make me a good one.
Within the next week, we got a small motion-activated camera and set it to notify my phone when it was activated. I knew there was a funeral scheduled for that Saturday, so I made sure to place the camera in a spot where it would get a good view near the new grave. Daniel was going to spend the night at my place. We were finally going to see the mysterious grave digger. I was so excited. But I also felt embarrassed about being excited over something that involved a funeral. We spent the evening playing video games and eating pizza. We checked the camera periodically from my phone, even when no motion was activated. We just kept seeing the twilight gathering of night over the cemetery and nothing more. The hours ticked by, and finally, we both fell asleep watching horror movies. The gentle jingling of wind chimes woke me. That was the alert I had chosen for when the camera was activated. I bolted upright and had to shake Daniel. He was clearly not as enthusiastic about this project, as he hadn't woken himself up. While rousing my friend, I fumbled with my phone to hit the button to bring up the camera. Daniel rubbed his eyes, and we both settled in to watch. We could see the rows of graves, and on the far side of them, we could see the stone door to the mausoleum. It was open, and that motion was what had activated the camera. I hit the green button on the screen to activate the sound so we could not only see, but hear what was happening before us. The heavy stone door, meant to open only on very rare occasions, was sliding open. It was strange not only to watch the door open completely, but, as far as I knew, it required special tools to open it. The door scraped against the stone floor, making noise. A nearby flock of crows were startled awake by the sound and fluttered upward, soaring in a burst of high-pitched caws. It felt like forever until the door finally finished slowly opening, and what stood in the dingy, dusty gloom made me drop my phone.
What the hell is that?
Daniel exclaimed. We both scrambled to pick up the phone to watch the thing within exit. It had a slow, shuffling gait, clearly dragging one leg and pulling its bony shoulders forward as if walking into a stiff wind. Its body was rail-thin, almost skeletal, with tattered scraps of archaic clothing hanging from its flimsy frame. The skin on its face was saggy and paper-thin. But the worst part was the holes in various places that allowed you to see cleanly through to the bone beneath. Its hair was white and wispy, almost missing save for a few wiry strands. Where its eyes should have been were wide open black voids. My heart beat 1,000,000 miles an hour. Daniel grabbed my arm.
Dude, what the hell's going on right now?
My wide eyes were glued to the nightmare depicted on the screen. I have no idea. It moved forward, and after an eternity, it finally reached the plot scheduled for excavation for tomorrow's funeral. It looked at the ground, then folded to its knees. Next, it began to claw at the black earth. Daniel and I watched in shock and horror as the thing slowly and systematically dug the grave. With its bare, claw-like, skeletal hands, we watched for a long time, mesmerized. Finally, Daniel spoke.
Maybe we should call the police. This is really messed up.
Without taking my eyes off the screen, I answered, but the grave was supposed to be dug tonight, and he's doing it. Don't you think the police would already know about this guy? He's the grave digger. Daniel shook his head.
No way this can be legal. The guy is like a zombie or something.
I shrugged, having no idea what to make of it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, he looks like a real-life zombie.
A really dead zombie, I mean. And are you forgetting, zombies eat people?
I snickered. Only in movies, Daniel.
Oh, so you're saying real-life zombies are sweet, kind old men? Give me a break.
Finally, I put the phone down. I don't know what this is, Daniel, but the city runs both the cemetery and the police department. And when I asked George about it, he acted weird and secretive and acted as if it was a well-known fact that graves are dug at night. So, whatever this is, I think the people who run our town already know about it. Daniel frowned deeply.
What if it's dangerous?
He whispered. I shrugged. I don't know. I don't know what to think. Right now, he just seems to be doing his job. After some discussion, we put the phone away and decided to sleep on it. The next day, the funeral was held, the coffin was lowered into the grave, and the grave would be filled in the following night. So we agreed when Daniel suggested he stay over again on Saturday and see what happened when a dead person was waiting to be buried. The next morning, I rushed to work. I took wide detours to avoid getting too close to the newly created grave or the mausoleum, focusing only on getting my tasks done. There was an eerie atmosphere in that place, completely different from before, and I wanted to get away as quickly as possible. That night, Daniel and I decided to go to bed early. We anticipated being woken up by the chimes again and concluded that it was best to sleep until zombie time. Plus, we were utterly exhausted from staying up late the previous night trying to get a glimpse of the creature. We decided to name the zombie Clyde. As expected, we both woke up to the soft chimes of my smartphone. This time, Daniel also sprang up almost simultaneously with me, and we quickly checked the camera footage. Clyde, it seemed, was quite the creature of habit, or rather, loyal to his routines. Just as he had the night before, he emerged from that eerie apartment. His movements were stiff, slow, and he headed towards the grave he had been diligently digging the previous night. Only then did his routine change. The bony character dropped into the grave. For a long time, there was nothing else to see. Just as we were about to give up and cut it off, suddenly, Clyde's bony fingers emerged from the grave and clawed into the dirt. We watched in excitement and horror as Clyde lifted himself out of the grave. But the problem was, Clyde had an arm in his hand, and he was eating it.
God, what is he doing?
Daniel exclaimed. I grabbed his arm. S-H-H-H, I warned, not wanting to wake my parents. It was the loudest sound we had ever heard from Clyde. He grunted and growled as he gnawed on the arm. There was a wet, squishing sound as raw flesh was crunched between his ancient teeth, and a cracking sound as sinewy meat tore from bone. His face was stained with blood, dirt, and the shadows of decay. Watching this transpire, disbelieving, I felt the blood rush to my head, a throbbing torrent.
I told you zombies eat people.
Daniel declared, whispering this time. I thought about it for a minute before responding. But at least it's someone who's already dead. Daniel pushed my arm and stared at me with an open mouth.
Are you serious?
I mean, I get that it's gross, but I have to admit, he's not hurting anyone.
I can't believe what you're saying.
Daniel muttered. What if it's some kind of deal? Clyde does this definitely horrific job that nobody wants to do, and in return, he gets what he needs? Daniel shook his head.
This is the most messed up thing I've ever heard.
No, hear me out. What if this is how all graveyards work? Maybe all grave diggers are like Clyde. What if it's normal? Daniel stared at me as if considering hitting me.
Michael, you've lost your mind. We absolutely have to call the police.
I frowned. You really think the police have any jurisdiction over a being that's obviously already dead? The grave gets dug when it needs to be, right on schedule it seems. And then, when someone needs to be buried, it conveniently gets filled back in. Do you really think George and the city folks don't know how that's getting done? Daniel sat back, pushed his phone away, and pondered what I said. I mean, it's like my job. I barely ever see George. He just leaves a list of tasks I need to complete on his office desk. I can't magically know what to do if nobody tells me. Clyde, well, Clyde seems even less cognitively capable than I am, So, Daniel asked. So, someone is telling him what to do. Daniel shuddered.
Gross. Gross, gross, gross.
Daniel didn't want to watch anymore, but I did. Clyde went back into the grave and came out with other parts of whoever was in there. He carried his spoils back to his mausoleum home, then came back and systematically filled the grave just as he had dug it. Good job, Clyde, I whispered. Despite my Clyde theory making good sense, Daniel became obsessed with keeping a close eye on the grave-digging monster. He downloaded the camera app to his phone so we could both watch, even when we weren't together. For 2 weeks, Clyde's routine continued unchanged. He would only appear at night when there was a grave to be dug. On other nights, the stone door remained closed, and we wouldn't see him. He always dug and covered the graves according to ancient, traditional procedures, and he always took a part of the corpse within. It was an unbelievable way of life, but it was Clyde's routine nonetheless. The problem began when something horrifying happened in our town. No one died for over a month. Clearly, that sounds like a really good thing to actually happen for any community. But by midsummer, no graves had been dug, and one night the chimes woke me. Even though I knew no grave was needed, I watched, compelled, as Clyde emerged from the mausoleum. He stumbled out, clearly moving more clumsily and unsteadily than usual, and looked unstable and precarious. He looked around wildly, shaking his head violently, as if rapidly swiveling his neck in a state of panic. If I had made eye contact with Clyde, I'm sure I would have seen him completely disoriented, looking around madly. That's when my phone rang. It was Daniel. Thanks to modern technology, I could immediately return my gaze to the screen after switching to speakerphone.
What's he doing?
Daniel asked urgently. I don't know, I admitted. Daniel and I watched Clyde quietly for a long time. He remained in front of the grave, looking around frantically with his terrifying, eyeless face. Then, he tilted his head back and howled, an ancient, primal sound of rage, a sound so terrifying that I quickly turned off the camera.
Whoa, what happened to him?
Daniel said. I was afraid to voice my thoughts, but I finally said it. He's been without a meal for too long, Daniel. He's probably hungry. In the light of day, we couldn't decide if this was truly our problem, or if we should report it to the authorities and become even more involved. The problem arose when a girl disappeared the following night. She was an older teenage girl than us. In fact, I'd heard about her before. She had just recently graduated from my own high school. The next morning after she went missing, her car was found abandoned on the side of the road just outside of town. She had been driving home late at night from out of town, and her car had presumably run out of gas. Authorities reasoned that she got out to walk into town, and from there, they had no idea what happened. She could have been kidnapped, or something else could have happened after she reached the city limits. There were no leads, but foul play wasn't ruled out. The problem was that the night this girl went missing, we were woken by the chimes. We watched Clyde push out of the mausoleum. We had never seen him move so fast. He raced in the opposite direction from the graves and quickly ran out of the camera's view. However, It was only a little while later that Clyde returned, and he was dragging a teenage girl. Her body was limp and lifeless, her throat torn open and dripping with blood.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Daniel was muttering frantically, sitting mesmerized in terror on the phone with me. We both turned off the camera.
We have to call the police right now. We absolutely have to, Michael. This is too much.
I ran my hands through my hair. Still, I don't think they don't already know about this, I asserted.
Michael.
Look, there's nothing we can do to help her now. Just calm down for a bit, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, I told Daniel. The next morning, the town was abuzz with the news of the missing girl. Everyone was talking about an old case from the 70s where someone had vanished on the same street. That time, it was a jogger in his 40s who had disappeared. People were completely fascinated by the two strange disappearances on the same street in a small, old town. Daniel and I did a little digging and discovered that when the jogger disappeared, there had been a long period of no deaths in the town prior to that. The pieces of the puzzle came together, and we admitted that as long as Clyde was fed, he was fine. But if he was hungry, it wasn't safe to pass the graveyard at night. And for some reason, the higher-ups in our community were allowing this to happen. Maybe it was tradition. Maybe it was a pact with the devil. Maybe it was like this everywhere. Maybe that's why you had to hold your breath when you passed a graveyard at night. If you hold your breath, the zombie doesn't know you're there. What would happen to citizens who knew about this dark conspiracy and tried to confront the authorities? After all, they'd accepted the horrific deaths of a middle-aged man and a young woman driving at night. In fact, they would need to protect these secrets at all costs. We were suddenly terrifyingly happy that we hadn't gone to the police. Well, don't hate me for this, Daniel, but he got what he needed. Maybe it'll be okay. People here can't live forever. People will start dying again, and Clyde will go back to normal. Daniel looked at me as if I was crazy, but he couldn't refute my logic. What could we do? The problem was, the halt in deaths continued. The townspeople were almost uncannily healthy and cautious, as if in the midst of a strange, abnormal winning streak, and no one perished. 6 more weeks passed, and we quietly entered autumn without a single death. Then, one night, we were woken by the chimes. Just as we had on the night of the unfortunate girl, Clyde pushed out of the mausoleum and, desiring a grave, howled at the moon.
We have to stop him.
Daniel said urgently when he showed up at my front door at 6 a.m. the next morning.
If anyone passes by there, he's going to kill them.
What do you want us to do? We can't know when someone will pass by. Even if the chimes wake us up, it will be too late. By the time we get there, we won't have time to warn anyone.
So, we have to be the someone who passes by. We know Clyde is coming. So, we cut off his head.
Are you crazy? I pressed.
He's just a rotten old man, Michael. We can do it.
Daniel and I had a huge fight about it. Ultimately, he agreed to give up on the plan. Otherwise, I would have threatened to call the police. And in the end, we were both more scared of the idea than of Clyde himself. So we let the whole thing rest in peace, barely talking about it, and simply prayed that someone would die of natural causes soon. But 3 days later, I was woken by the chimes. I immediately jolted upright, filled with an unfathomable sense of dread. Despite my initial thought that there was no way I could help anyone who stumbled into Clyde's domain, I was compelled by an urgent feeling to try. I was only 5 blocks from the cemetery, and someone was about to die. I had to try. I didn't even touch my phone, just sprang out of bed and ran. I ran until my lungs felt like they would burst, but I didn't slow down at all. Within half a block, I could see someone standing in front of the black iron fence to the cemetery. It was Daniel. He seemed frozen in place. Clyde was tearing through the grass and graves, covering an astonishing amount of ground, and Daniel seemed absolutely paralyzed by fear. Whatever he had planned for this grand heroic mission had been overridden by the terror of the grave digger's presence. "Oh my God, Daniel, hold your breath," I whispered, trying to increase my frantic pace. I was moving faster than Clyde, but Clyde had far less ground to cover to reach Daniel. "Hold your breath, Daniel, hold your breath." My feet kept pounding the pavement as I screamed. By the time the screams left my lips, I was almost next to Daniel. As if in response to my voice, Daniel pulled back from his trance, slowly turned his face towards me. In that moment, Clyde reached through the fence. I had just reached Daniel's side, and the next moment, Clyde violently dragged him into the iron bars, biting into his throat almost simultaneously with my fingertips brushing Daniel's sleeve. There was no hesitation or delay. Clyde tore Daniel's throat with his teeth. I watched, stunned, as my friend's life flowed out. Between the exhaustion of the sprint and the overwhelming fear, I was hyperventilating wildly. Somewhere in my mind, I heard my mother's voice.
Michael, hold your breath.
But in that moment, as I desperately gasped for air, the words no longer held any meaning. Clyde's face suddenly lifted. If he had eyes, their gaze would undoubtedly have been fixed on me. He let go of Daniel, and my friend's lifeless body collapsed to the ground. Clyde began to awkwardly stagger towards the open gate, only about 3 meters away. He seemed about to leave the cemetery immediately, but I had no weapon. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I finally drew a full breath into my lungs and desperately forced myself to hold that breath. At that moment, Clyde stopped moving. His head, with its empty eye sockets, was turned towards me for just a fleeting second, and the next moment, he turned around and staggered back towards Daniel's fallen body. I turned my back and ran at full speed. A few days later, after Daniel's horribly sad funeral, when my family got back to the house, I walked into the kitchen where my mother was making coffee. "Mom?" I asked softly. She turned and gave me a sad smile.
Yes, honey?
"Do you remember telling me, a long time ago, about always holding your breath when you passed a graveyard?" In that moment, the expression vanished from my mom's beautiful face. I watched silently as the color drained from her cheeks. I whispered, "Do you know the story behind that superstition?" Her eyes darkened, and it looked as if a shadow had fallen across her face.
No, honey.
She said softly.
It's just an old superstition.
She was lying. I knew it. She knew the truth. We moved shortly after that. We only stayed in that town for a brief period while my parents found us a new destination. Of course, our next destination was nowhere near a graveyard. Now you know. The real reason why you have to hold your breath when you pass a graveyard at night. It's not a superstition. It's a survival tactic. And now that you have this knowledge, you can never unlearn it. The next time you drive by or walk past a graveyard, you'll remember, and you'll hold your breath. Because if you don't, if you keep breathing, they'll know you're there. And if no one has died for a long time, they're hungry. My mom always said it was important to be aware of your surroundings. But it's not just for graveyards. Your town might have the same arrangement.